Thank you to everybody. Today I'm going to talk to you about biometrics for onboarding. What does that actually mean? It means how can you use a person's physical attributes to give them access to services online, and specifically in the financial services space. Onfido is originally a British company from London, but we now have 7 offices globally, including one for Southeast Asia in Singapore. We've been going for about 7 years, and we've learned a lot about how people onboard their clients throughout that time. Many of you will be familiar with this cartoon. This was featured in the New Yorker in 1993. On the internet, nobody knows you're a dog. Sadly, 26 years later, this is still true. We really struggle to verify and identify users when they're interacting with financial services, with healthcare services, education. The more and more we bring services online, the bigger this challenge becomes. In terms of opening bank accounts and opening financial services accounts, this process has evolved. It used to take days. You used to have to go to one bank. You'd have to then go to your lawyers. It would take many days across many different places in town. Then we moved on to a slightly better situation where you could onboard in the same day. You could go to your bank and receive a card in person that same day. Pretty good, but still quite a lot of friction from the user. And now, thanks to technology, you can onboard and open a bank account in just minutes with a challenger bank. So how does this work for you in the room if you work for a financial services organization, and how does this work in practice? The first challenge is fraud detection. Have a quicker look at these ID documents. These are all US passports. I wonder if you can see which of these is real. Quite challenging. With the human eye, we can see that in the top row, there are ID numbers. It's pretty easy if you know the logic for these, or you do a checksum validation to identify if this is a legitimate ID number or not. Similarly, you can also look at a security feature. It's pretty easy to see this is missing from the other one on the top row. But when you move into more sophisticated fraud, tricky tampering like pixel tampering, slight changes to font, this challenge becomes much more difficult. And then how do you do this on a global level? Think of all the countries in the world, and then think of all the different identity types and identity document types in these countries. In Malaysia, for example, you have a MyCard, but you have multiple versions of that. The second challenge is friction. 45% of users logging into an online banking system abandon the sign-up process due to a poor user experience. This is a really, really big challenge, and these numbers are just from last year. Is this better? This sounds much better. Apologies. What you need to think about when you have friction in an onboarding process is it proportional to the risk that I'm trying to mitigate? There are lots of ways that banks try and onboard people today. It varies in different countries. It varies with different products and how risky those products are. And then all intertwined with that is regulation and how you're mandated to do that by your regulators. A very common and traditional way of identifying users used to be the identity database model. This is where you take something like a social security number, you ask a user to key that in, or maybe you use an OCR technology to extract data from their IC. You then run this against the database. Either it's a hit, either it's a match, or it's not. And you've checked, does this person exist? That's great. It's very easy for users to do, very low friction, but it doesn't actually prevent you against impersonation. There's no fraud detection on there. It's very easy to steal somebody else's ID document, key in their number, or even buy in bulk big stacks of social security or ID numbers on the black market. There are breaches all over the world from companies like Equifax, Marriott, but also for Aadhaar breaches in India. So it means it's very easy to access this information and impersonate somebody else. The next thing you can do is a document verification, something I touched on earlier. Document verification is good. You're checking that somebody has a legal ID document. A relative amount of friction, asking them to provide this document. Again, doesn't quite mitigate against stolen ID documents. stolen identities. So today I'm going to focus on the biometric element of this. How do you take the ID model? How do you take the document model and then add on to this selfie and indeed liveness verification? So I'm going to do a little deep dive into biometrics and the kind of approaches that we've seen at Onfido really work today, especially in the banking and financial services sector. I wonder if anybody in the room is able to tell me which of these is fake. It's pretty tricky. It's actually a trick question. These are all fake. These are all AI-generated faces. This gives you a bit of an idea of the challenge that we're dealing with today. Fraudsters are incredibly sophisticated. It's really difficult for a human like you and I to work out if identities are true or false. As fraud evolves, we move from the kind of standard photo of a document or photo of somebody's LinkedIn or Facebook profile picture, even a photo of a printed photo. These are quite easy things to spot, quite easy things for fraudsters to do. But then we move on to masks. The 2D mask, very simple, but also my favorite is a 3D mask with the eyes cut out. You can buy these for $50 from Amazon. They're made of silicone, they're super professional, and to be honest, quite creepy. Then there's video playback, deepfakes, etc. So you really need to not just check if somebody's got a face. You've got to check it's a real face, and it's a live face. At Onfido, we've spent 7 years perfecting techniques and trying to work out how you can actually do this, and we've developed a 3-factor approach. So first, you start with a document verification. You use this as the source of truth for someone's identity. You make sure that something issued by the government is legitimate. You then match a selfie, somebody's face, with that document, the image in the document. But to make sure that somebody is actually there and live at that time, it's not a stolen ID document, it's not a stolen selfie or even a selfie papped across the room, you have to ask for a liveness verification. Step 1, comparing the selfie with the document. Firstly, you can use machine learning to extract images and data from a document. Then you use machine learning algorithms to compare the two faces. Machine learning algorithms, if trained well and correctly, are 15 times more accurate than a human at telling if two faces are the same. As we're dealing with more and more fraud techniques, we need to be better than humans at doing this. You can then assign a score. How similar are these faces? For example, a 0 score would mean no match. A score of 1 would be suspicious. It would be too much of a match and too similar. So you want to find something in the middle. Then you move on to a liveness test. I'm going to let this roll in the background while I speak so you can have a look at how we do this at Onfido. So we do the selfie match. We then ask the user to read 3 digits out loud. These are randomly generated, can't be pre-recorded. The really good thing about including speech in a biometric verification is that it requires the user to move their lips and move the whole of their jaw, the bottom half of their face. Secondly, we ask for a head movement, either to the left or to the right. This enables you to look at not just the face, but also the side of the head and check for integrity of the 3D head rather than just a 2D face. Taking a bit of a deep dive into kind of what's going on behind the scenes here and how technology is enabling this. You can look at some features. For example, texture analysis. In the top, we see a genuine video. You can see a heat map created by deep learning techniques that shows a lot of depth in the image. We can see it's a 3D image. If you look at the bottom one, which is indeed a spoof, it's a video, it's just a 2D frame, and you can see this by the red marking the fraud in the heat map. Another feature that we use is within the liveness detection, the head movement, a tracking of the face. So on the left-hand side, you can see a true, real face. You can see its 3D shape. And on the right-hand side, you can see a 2D mask pasted onto somebody's head. You can see there's a break between the face and the rest of the head. And thirdly, you can use lip syncing. So when we're asking a user to read out 3 numbers, we're not testing their literacy. We're not testing what language they're speaking in or how good they are at reading. We're testing to see if the sound that they're making is the same as the lip movement. It's coming out in the same time frame. The reason we're doing this is to make sure that somebody isn't recording somebody across a room. They're not pre-recording somebody. The numbers are randomly generated, so the user has to be doing this live and at real time. And again, as I mentioned, the speech is very important to look at movement throughout the whole bottom half of the face, specifically around the lips, to mitigate against that creepy 3D mask that we saw earlier. You don't want to have a line or a break around the lips. As I mentioned before, 45% of people drop out of an online banking onboarding experience due to poor UX. So you need to have convenience in your onboarding platform. And to do this, again, you can use technology. You can use software development kits, otherwise known as SDKs. A strong SDK can give you a 95% first-time pass rate. So how do you do this? You guide the user. You tell them, this is what we're going to ask you to do. We're going to ask you to provide an identity document. We're going to ask you to give us a selfie. We're going to ask you to repeat a few actions. Then you give them feedback. If they've taken a photo that has glare on it, or if they're trying to do something and it's blurred, you tell them. And then you have a 27% drop-off, a 27% improvement in your onboarding with that blur feedback, for example, or 23% with glare detection. Enabling users to give and change how they're giving you their information in real time is good for the UX point. It's also very good from a cost perspective. You don't want to be receiving information from users that you then have to pay for if it can't even be processed. I think it's important also to delve in here a little bit on why face is a good biometric, because there are a lot of other biometrics out there in the market. And if you have, for example, an iPhone, you'll be used to providing a fingerprint. So why have we chosen face as the biometric as choice? Firstly, face is very good because it's universally present on all government IDs. This means you've got something to compare it to. You can compare it back to that source of truth. Secondly, it's intuitive. People understand face. They accept it. They're used to taking selfies. It's a very simple thing from a user experience perspective. And thirdly, I forget the clicker to write, it's device agnostic. You don't have to pay for extra hardware. You don't have to ask your users to buy the latest iPhone with fingerprint scanning. It's a very easy way of allowing users just to use a simple smartphone or feature phone that has a camera to access services online. Using face, you widen access. And the most important thing for any service, be it financial or health or education or other, is to make sure that the right people are accessing the services that they deserve. And it's working. In fact, according to Experian in a recent study, 3 out of 4 people in the Asia-Pacific region actually have more trust in their banking provider if they experience an element of biometric security during an onboarding process. Here in Malaysia, we're very proud to be working with the likes of Money Match and BigPay. We're also working with large banks globally. In fact, Barclays Bank in the UK awarded Onfido their Innovation Supplier Award of the Year just last month. It's been a delight to speak to you all this morning. I'm going to be on a panel very shortly and again conducting a forum this afternoon. So if you have any questions about biometrics, about face, or about Onfido, please feel free to come along, ask lots of questions, and also reach out to me on LinkedIn or via email. Thank you very much for your time.